Thank you. Ilya, it's great to have you here today and great to share the stage with you. As we heard, you're one of the most prominent Ukrainian journalists and possibly even one of the most famous Ukrainians at the moment. But you have taken a step towards new career by publishing a book about the fights for Kyiv. How was that period for you, and was there some moment which made a huge impact on you in that period?
It's been like more than 2 years, but it's been so long that it feels like it was like a historical epoch away from today, from now. I decided to write a book about the Battle of Kyiv, and not simply a war, history, story, but simply a humane story about regular people, because there was such an outbreak of insane patriotism, of optimism, of hope, of defiance, that it left such a deep scar on my mind, on my soul. It's such an insane thing to witness from inside. And one of the things, I guess, that really illustrates the mood that I really wanted to describe in my book is the day of February 25th, essentially day 2 of the Russian full-scale invasion, actually my 30th birthday. And there was this moment that went viral on the internet, that the Ukrainian police in the northern district of Kyiv, the Obolon, the police was handing out Kalashnikov rifles, the guns, just in the streets to very regular people, just from ammo boxes, handing out these guns for people who are willing to join the fight and expect Russians in these very streets. So these regular people, just like you and me, just like anyone that you can see in your regular life, they were holding Kalashnikov rifles for the first time in their lives, and they were ready to fight against Russian tanks in the very own streets of their own capital city. I was so devastated from seeing this, and there is a video on the internet, you can actually find it on the internet, that moment was a pivotal moment for me when I decided that it's a history happening. So I think that illustrates a lot of what it is and what my book is about. So that was the main moment for me.
Well, thank you for sharing that. We can just imagine how high the emotions were on that day. Our main topic here today is the information war in Ukraine, and this has been truly an exceptional war, as we basically have a live broadcast to the front lines from our bedrooms, including mine. And Ilya, you have been following the war already since 2014, when Russia attacked Ukraine, annexed Crimea, and started the war in eastern Ukraine. But in 2022, something seemed to change also in the media sphere. Ukraine really quickly gained the sympathies of the big public. Did Ukraine change its communication narrative fundamentally?
There are two parts of what's happening when it comes to Ukrainian approach to this, because the Ukrainian government, Ukrainian leadership, they still have this line of state propaganda that has its narrative, this infamous live marathon, like news marathon on TV that no one really watches. They have a pretty out-of-touch picture of what's happening. They bring an overly optimistic view. Well, essentially they do what a clumsy bureaucratic machine would be expected to do in wartime to serve the media interests of a country in wartime. But the thing about Ukraine is that the non-government media space, journalists, civilian life, social media also, they live a pretty parallel life. It's a different thing, different beast. And of course, the war started as per usual laws of human nature. It started with this outburst of enthusiasm, defiance, hope, and this recklessness, this defiance towards all these forecasts that Ukraine doesn't have a chance to stand, Ukraine will be over in 72 days. It was about all those things, like insane outbursts of emotions and of energy. But steadily, again, according to the basic rules of how human minds work, it's switched more to more practical things. We pay more attention to discussing very practical problems of us, the problems that we need to eradicate, like corruption, incompetence, malpractice in government, in the military too, irresponsible military commanders that have little to no responsibility for the unsubstantiated clashes. We really try to answer the question, what is wrong about this country and about this system that prevents us from making another step forward. So we are switching to less emotional, being less empowered by these emotions, but more about like mechanism and fixing this mechanism, because there are moving parts and they get broken every single moment.
And speaking of Ukrainians, how do you see the role of like ordinary Ukrainians in the informational war, and are they as successful in it as they were in the beginning of the war?
Well, I'm not sure if I can judge if they are successful. I think it's for outsiders to judge. But I must say that ordinary Ukrainians, so many men and women living in Ukraine and taking the part in the in wartime and the life of the country, they really help in their masses to play this role in coercion changes upon the government, in eradicating things that we don't like, in supporting media, in for instance, anti-corruption investigations, but also, and I think this is something that's really good that is happening. Many ordinary people, like soldiers, what I see is that they gradually switch to writing stuff in English and on X, on Twitter, and they talk about their feelings, their emotions, the problems that they want foreigners to inform about these problems. And sometimes I really try to make retweets or highlight these voices, because I see that many Ukrainians do this. I really want to think that I have played some part in this, into giving more inspiration to Ukrainian voices and in speaking up. But sometimes, they simply join us, journalists, ordinary people, soldiers, volunteers also, people from the military. They join us into speaking about Ukraine, trying to reach out as many brains and hearts beyond Ukraine as possibly can. I think it plays quite a role. If you are on Twitter, if people like you, if people read you, it means that you exist, it means that your voice exists, and it works. It actually works.
Now that you mentioned Twitter, the nowadays platform known as X, you're a big influencer there. You have over 1 million followers there, and but everyone who is using that platform know that it's heated talks there. It's a lot of disinformation there, and there are also like pro-Russian accounts with millions of followers spreading their narrative of the war. How would you describe your role on this platform during the wartime?
What I'm trying to do is that I try to be honest. I try to be the guy from Ukraine that that you see on Twitter, on social media almost every day, who is not perfect in terms of what he says on social media, who's sincere, who is really honest about what he believes in, who's really believes what he's talking about. And I try to be that guy who you can trust, because with this rise of social media, especially when it comes to Western information space, and I think we're getting back to a sort of journalism or media activity that is more personalized, more sincere, that is about someone's face and someone's name rather than large media brands. I think people get more trust. They deserve more, can win more trust rather than big corporation with lots of resources. And it's a beautiful thing, by the way. So I try to have sort of a sincere and friendly conversation, simple conversation with my audience in a friendly way possible, and explain a lot of complicated truth instead of simplistic lies that many of our enemies try to spread, because it's really catchy, it's really tempting to sometimes believe simplistic lies rather than listen to complicated truths. But if you have a person you can trust, if you feel like you can trust, I think it works. That's what I think about.
Let's dig a little bit deeper to your role. So you are, of course, a big influencer, a famous journalist, but in the same time, you are a patriotic Ukrainian. How much do you have to balance between that role in the social media? And are there moments, for example, that you would want to leave something unsaid?
Trying to combine the role of Ukrainian, willing to live in Ukraine and be Ukrainian and willing to stay alive. Sometimes it's a bit of a challenge to mix it with being a journalist, especially when it comes to the standards of Western media space. But at the same time, it's really not a contradiction, because we often think about this in Ukraine, that being a Ukrainian journalist is a blessing and a curse at the same time, because from one hand you have to combat insanely rich propaganda machine on the enemy side, but at the same time you don't have to invent anything, you don't have to lie, you just describe what you see with your own eyes. You just be honest about what's happening, and because you are being honest about what's happening, you don't shy away from talking about complicated things or nasty things that sometimes happen in our country, such as corruption scandals, for instance. And we talk about corruption. There's no-goes. We do not have any no-goes on in Ukraine because trying to coerce us into not talking about something. And just because we are patriotic, just because we love this country, we want to live in this, we want this country to win. We talk about many problems in our military. We talk about corruption because we want this country to be a better place and thus survive. So there's no contradiction at all. You have to talk about complicated things to eradicate them in order to be truly patriotic, if you want your country to survive. If we were doing things in Russian way, there will be no Ukraine on the world map anymore. Yeah.
Definitely.
When it comes to things that I try not to talk about, I know sometimes, it sometimes happens that I need to check it in my brain if I sound way too emotional, way too fanboyish when it comes to the Ukrainian military, for instance, because one must understand that in Ukraine, the military have the iconic status. After everything that happened since 2022, it's unbelievable what these men and women have done unbelievable and impossible things when it comes to the war with Russia. So sometimes you have to check your emotions and to stay professional and nice. And sometimes it's better to not to tweet than to tweet something about, for instance, the birthday of General Valery Zaruzhny, because you sound really fanboyish about this guy. So it's better that you sometimes it's better not to tweet.
Yeah. And speaking about roles in this informational war, we must mention President Zelensky. We all remember that video from the first day of the war when he was with his team outside on the streets in Kyiv saying "Мы тут," meaning "we are here." That made a huge impact on the wide public. How would you describe his role in this information war, and could the outcome of the war even be different if he wasn't the president of Ukraine?
I remember a moment of the first day of the invasion, maybe day 2, also around the February 25th, and I check the social media at Justas, and I see just a torrent of memes from Western users in Western media space, showing Zelensky and this phrase, "I need ammo, not a ride." And with lots of T-shirts appearing with Zelensky's face, lots of people just being absolutely stunned and expressed by the way he deals with that situation, by the fact that he stays in Kyiv under attack, that he refused to be evacuated by the United States. And I just got one thought at that moment, that who could expect this, that this guy, with his shitty comedy show, with his shitty movies, with his attitude, and deeply and serious attitude towards the presidency before the full-scale invasion, we must admit this, who could expect it that this guy will be essentially end up being one of the world's greatest war leaders, and we will be absolutely proud of him and what he does. And it's like, it's something incredible. It's just because war tends to be making people to reveal their true self. You are who you really are on war. And at some point, Zelensky reveals his true self too, just like many people in Ukraine. And this was possibly the only good option for us. He was the only person, from my understanding, from my knowing of my country, and he was the only person who could do this in exactly this way, of staying in Kyiv under attack and essentially opting to die and be killed by Russian troops in Kyiv's government quarter and not escaping. And this played out really well, and essentially he became what he is, what he'll be remembered in history, thanks to this uneasy decision and this moral choice that he essentially made. I'm not sure if we had someone else. I'm not saying any names. I'm not sure if we had more traditional politician or less defiant and reckless politician, that he or she would not appear in Warsaw on the day before the invasion. I'm not sure if Ukraine would fall without, a leader in Kyiv, but still that would be a major sign to everybody outside Ukraine. And there will be less of this insane phenomena that's popped up in world media regarding Ukraine, regarding the first months of the invasion. So he's definitely played a huge role. We do acknowledge this, but of course he's far from being that ideal. He's much more strongly criticized in Ukraine, especially now that emotions died down. We talk about more practical things. So that's a different question. But yes, he has definitely played a role, and we should give him his credit, even though I didn't vote him.
All right. We could talk much more about Zelensky, but let's return a little bit in the beginning of the war. After Ukraine survived the first shockwaves of Russian attack, there was a lot of optimism in the air. There were talks that the Russian army might fall. There were even talks that Putin might die, etc. Looking backwards, was there over-optimism in the air? And if so, was it a mistake?
There was a lot of optimism and hope in Ukraine and outside Ukraine, this definitely. Was it good? Was it a mistake? Yes, that was a mistake. But at the same time, there was so many reasons for this historic optimism, because so many things went wrong for Russia. Who could expect it? Who could expect things like sudden Russian defeat in the Battle of Kyiv? Who could expect the Kharkiv operation, the liberation of Kherson? Ukraine getting so many weapons that used to be like absolute no-go zone at every single step. Who could expect that? Absolutely no one. And I remember the mood by the end of, the ecstatic mood by the end of 2022. We were looking forward towards the period after the winter, which was supposed to be like a spring counteroffensive in which Ukraine accumulates very large Western assistance and makes an ultimate strike, probably somewhere in the south, to essentially end this war and absolutely destroy Russian logistics of this war. And we were really feeling like it's a realistic plan. It's something that points out from the entire course of the previous year of war. So we were feeling like the year 2023 would be the end of the war. It would be the very much deserved and very structurally mechanical planned end of the war. But a lot of things went wrong, unfortunately. A lot of things in Ukraine too, but also outside Ukraine. So we are where we are right now. We're not losing hope. We keep working on. The fact that we have had so many setbacks and mistakes doesn't mean that we have to give up. It's just us in need of acquiring this fact and trying to learn from our mistakes, not to repeat the dissatisfaction of the year 2022, unfortunately.
When we read the media now, it seems that it's much more a skeptical picture of the situation in Ukraine. But do you think that the media has more a realistic picture now? And what would you say is the role of Russian information war? Are they still capable to make the picture of the situation look bad and skeptical here in the West?
No, there's a very interesting thing about the work of media in the Russian-Ukrainian war. Sometimes I seriously think that, from one hand, we have for instance, New York Times writing really weird op-eds about Ukraine or editorials about Ukraine, how Ukraine needs to have concessions or surrender or something like that kind, saying that Ukrainian victories are not realistic, stuff like that, and proving itself wrong again and again and again and again, and really getting a lot of hate in Ukraine. But at the same time, the same New York Times has had one of the greatest pieces of journalism of all time, which is the investigation of the Bucha massacre in Ukraine. They had everything. They have unfolded each and every second of what was happening in the town under Russian occupation, from satellite pictures to drone surveillance to an astronomical checkup and stuff like that. They absolutely undeniably proved the Russian role in so many killings in the town. So here we go with another thing. The thing about the modern space is that, informational space, is that this freedom of expression, this freedom of narrative, this lack of control over something, of someone dictating something, it really produces a lot of trouble, such as these controversial op-eds and editorials. But at the same time, this freedom of expression brings you diamonds. And the positive side of it, as I see it, it really overwhelms and really overweights the negative side, which is this weird op-eds, for instance. So it's better to keep things as it is. No one's really having control over what media write about this. Some write terrible takes about this, but some do heroic investigations about it. So it would be not possible if we had something else other than complete freedom of expression. When it comes to Russians and what the narratives that they advance, of course, they do exploit this negative sides and these weaknesses of this freedom of expression of this. And it's something that we have to work with by being more persuasive, by being of higher quality. So we're also in this pool of freedom, and it's our job to be better than them, even though they have really strong instruments, such as the promotion of really catchable and simplistic lies. But you can beat this by being better.
Ilya, I think we have time for one more question.
Sure.
Let's return to social media. When I read your post or other pro-Ukrainian accounts on the social media platforms, there is one usual accusation, which always there, that Ukrainians are warmongers, you don't want to speak about peace, etc. But this topic is also brought up regularly here in Europe. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's just another example of the way enemy propaganda works. They just catch upon something that is tempting, that feels like an easy solution to a complicated problem, and it feels even logical. Why can't you stop the war by just giving Putin something like half of Ukraine or something, or a city? And they really promote this narrative, and you get this seed of thought in your brain, and you're seriously thinking about this. Why are these Ukrainians so stubborn? Why don't they do they like being in war? Do they like burying their friends and families and loved ones? But the problem is that it's our job to be always talking about this, to be explaining to people that things are not as simple as Russians want you to believe. It is tempting. They are tempting you into an easy deal with the devil that will end really bad, as it always happens. The thing is that it's not about a certain region. It's not about a certain city that Putin will get and leave us alone in peace. It's just not the way to reach what we all want, which is the coming of peace and prosperity and normal life. Nobody wants peace more than so many Ukrainians that are out there. We just try to explain to people that it's not about certain parts of Ukraine, it's about the entire Ukraine. If you have a tumor in your head that is killing you, it doesn't matter if you amputate an arm or a leg, it's about the entire organism. Unfortunately, that's the situation, and we try to bring this thought and to come over this temptation that Russian propaganda is suggesting. Things are complicated, things are hard, but there's something to work with, and we try to do this.
Let's try to remember that. Ilya, thank you for the great discussion and enjoy your time in Finland.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Finland.